Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 161 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, the DAP network, if you will. And I just dapped the camera somehow like someone was going to dap me back. With me in the side seat tonight, the one and only Rocky Petrella. How are you tonight, Rocky?
Doing good. Happy to be back here after a couple weeks off. Always love potting with you, Andrew, and very interested to talk to our guest tonight. Someone we haven't had on before, someone I haven't talked to before, so it should be a good time.
Yeah, so what we were just talking about before we went live is that, we try to get some voices on this show that you might not hear everywhere or kind of get some different angles on things. And we don't mind having repeat guests. Of course, that's a fan. We're fans of those people too. But I felt like I talked to Ronnie a bunch of times. We met at the expo, had a great time. And I felt like Ronnie would be a great guest for this show. So Ronnie Evans, welcome to the Dynasty Junkies podcast. How are you, sir?
Thank you, man. I'm good. It's been you've been a huge supporter. I went through a bit of a mental health journey earlier this year and had been for the last few years. I've come out of it. I'm making some moves within the industry and trying to just be as friendly as I can to as many people along this journey. I think this industry is great. And always shout out to the expo. I was so happy to meet you there. We had a great time hanging out. And for anyone watching, if you haven't been, it's worth it. Just do it.
Yes. I think everybody that I've ever talked to that went to the expo loved going. I don't think I've heard of really anybody regretting it. I think there was one guy last year, not this year, but last year that didn't have a great time, but that was about it. Otherwise, Everybody's had a blast and it's been awesome. So highly recommend it. I agree. And it's great to meet people and talk to people and kind of get to know other different angles in the industry. With that in mind, I guess, Ronnie, just in case people haven't heard of you or don't know who you are, like, what would you say you do here? Like, what is it that you can do in the fantasy space, and why would people know you?
A lot of interesting stuff, hopefully, that comes out in the next year. And I know everyone likes to say that, but genuinely, I have been fortunate enough to intermingle and talk with some very important people within this space. And I'm hoping to do some stuff that I can be really proud of. But I currently hop on people's shows, and I've played fantasy football for 20 years as of next off season. And I focus on Dynasty, focus on IDP. I am helping out the sports affiliate just through support and a little bit behind the scenes right now, which is where Greg Kellogg is, and like JC, Dynasty, Iggy, all of those guys. They're fantastic. I've been with Gridiron Ratings for the last 3-4 years, helping Jeff behind the scene. And that's been a evolving door of a kind of amalgamous, in a good way, shifting, not a blob, but a shifting website in terms of its approach to fantasy. And he just actually launched a couple weeks ago. He paid a web dev to come in and clean up the site, whole 9 yards. And it launched, I think, 7 weeks ago. And so go check it out. It's gridironratings.com. And I'm on Twitter at Ronnie A. Evans. And my mental health nonprofit is at Fantasy Proceeds.
Love it. I knew that you had a lot to get through, and I'm glad that you said it all, because I wasn't sure if you were just going to say, I just hang out on Twitter. Like, no, I'm glad you went through and did everything. It has been a good time getting to know you. I know you mentioned some of the mental health struggles. I think a lot more people deal with that than really are willing to talk about. And I thought it was great of you to kind of, mention some of that right out of the gate. It can be rough sometimes just living in this world we're in. So, yeah. So, yeah, as I always say, DMs are open. I know Ronnie's are as well. If you ever need help, you ever need a hand, you just want to vent about something, we're here to help. I'm sure Rocky would appreciate that as well. But I know with all of his kids, it's tricky for him to get back. Just giving you a hard time, Rock. Well, so let's get right into it. We've got a lot to get into tonight. The game is still just about at halftime. There was looks like an interception by the Saints, which is kind of entertaining. A pretty good game so far, 2 ETN touchdowns. But yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one. But let's look at some of the news. We started with, and I'll kind of go with the worst news, I suppose. Anthony Richardson officially done for the year. They pretty much have announced that he's having the surgery on his shoulder. I think it's the best thing for him to do long-term for his career, but it stinks if you have him in any league, and I have him in a couple. And as a rebuilding team, I'm now looking at him as a perfect target. Like, okay, let's get some points off my roster. Maybe I can go get some value in Anthony Richardson. But Rocky, I'll kick it to you first. What are your thoughts on this? Does it change his dynasty value at all? What are you doing with him? All that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it really does change his dynasty value. I mean, it's his rookie year. He did nothing in the time that he was in there to get anybody, damper any expectations for him. He looked good from a fantasy perspective anyway. Wasn't too bad as a passer either. So like just from an NFL perspective. So like again, there's no reason to just because he's out for the year. I mean, if you're even if you're a contender, I should say, I am not looking to move him because most likely if you had Anthony Richardson, you probably weren't depending on him anyway coming into the season if you were a contender. So why sell him now when if there is any dip at all, it's right now, and it's just going to go right back up to where he was when he comes back next year. So that's basically where he's at for me. Rebuild contender. I'm fine. He's basically a hold as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't even call him a buy just because I don't think there's going to be a dip. I think anybody who has him likes him and isn't going to want to move off of him.
Well, that's a fair point too. I mean, honestly, this is it's a weird situation because he's a very young, obviously a rookie quarterback that can run and has shown enough in the 4 weeks or so that we got to see him that I feel like everybody was like, oh, okay, he's the guy we thought. He's the guy we thought he was going to be, and I'm very excited about that. I'm not sure that changes his value much in dynasties, so that's kind of nice. Ronnie, are you kind of on that same page?
I think it's important. First of all, yeah, Rocky nailed it. I agree. I'm not selling him. I've got him in 2 leagues in dynasty leagues. I'm holding on to that Rock, number one player in fantasy during the games that he played. I mean, he proved to be, yeah, like you alluded to, everything we thought it could be, and a lot of the hype proved to not just be hype. He's been a fascinating case study to go back and look at his college tape and try and figure out exactly what Florida was doing wrong with him. But one important note on him is these injury concerns. They go back to high school. It has been something that has been prevalent with him every single year, every step along the way. And I don't love labeling certain players injury prone, but I do think that human beings have different levels of dexterity. That's just a scientific fact, and it shows up in professional sports. Anthony Richardson, he's struggled with it his entire career so far, dating back to when he's a teenager. And so my move right now in Dynasty with Anthony Richardson, great example. I'm in a league where thankfully, first time in 7 years, I've decided to try and tank because of how captivating next year's class is. And I had Anthony Richardson and Joe Burrow. And so things weren't going super hot anyway. But I'm trying to pair Richardson with another at least above average quarterback for the time being, because there is an element of risk that is unavoidable. The best ability is availability, and that's his number one red flag. It was for me when he was coming out. That's my hesitation with him, but don't ship him. I'll be quiet. I love Anthony Richardson, man, even though I'm a Vols fan.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. If you're rebuilding, he's a fine option to kind of stash on your roster, but I think Tater will put it really well too. AR is a very bad buy in redraft. I agree. In redraft, I would not be buying Anthony Richardson. There's no reason. Right. But I love that logic. I think the other thing you mentioned, which I want to hit on, was pairing him with an above average quarterback. And that kind of pairs up with another piece of news that Kyler might be coming back here pretty soon. Is Kyler Murray a good kind of quarterback maybe to pair with Anthony Richardson? Do you feel like that would be a good above average quarterback option to kind of go with on a rebuild?
I could see it, yeah. Anyone that I think can have weekly top 12 upside any given week is, of course, a fine play in Dynasty, and I want to pair those guys. But I think if you can get into that top 15 range, like those guys in that 8 to 15 range, you can trade for them. Kyler Murray's in that range right now. I bet you when he comes back, he's not a top 7 quarterback this year. So
no, yeah. I don't think so. What about you, Rocky? You on that Kyler train, or you think he's someone you're willing to go acquire on a rebuild specifically?
I mean, I don't know about now, but I have been this year because of the injury, because of the dip in value. He's been a top 10 quarterback fantasy-wise every year he's been in the league. I did expect him to come back this year, and I did throw it on the show sheet. The practice window is open. It does look like he's coming back. So I mean, he's tailed off, but we saw Josh Dobbs looking halfway decent this year. So I still think Kyler can perform at that top 10 level if he's healthy. If not, he will next year. But I don't care if it's in Arizona or not. He's gonna be a starter somewhere. He's gonna be good. He's not gonna be elite, but he's gonna be good. And from a fantasy perspective, he's gonna be in that top 10, 8, 7 range because of the rushing ability.
I like that. I think that's a fair way to put it. I think there's some trepidation about Kyler. There has been all season, right? And I think you hit on something perfectly there. It's that I have been buying him, but not now. Like now is his value just took a bump. Why would you buy now? Like now he's finally coming off the IR and people are hopeful again. Like now is not the time to buy him. I kind of agree with that logic.
Right.
Now might not be the time to sell him either, though, because he hasn't played yet. He hasn't shown anything. Like you might want to wait and see at least until he's.
I would be more
gonna
willing
play.
to buy than sell him right now. I don't think
I would be too. I'm just saying.
I don't think
his
the value is bounced back.
I don't think his value is really acclimated to the news yet.
No,
at least in
I
the
don't think
leagues
so
and the
either.
circles I talk to.
No, that's perfectly fine. I'm just saying his value is higher than it was a week ago. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
like
sure,
now is not
sure,
the best
of
time
course.
to buy. That's what I'm saying.
Of course.
Yeah, he's still a buy for sure. I think if you can still
If
get
we
him
want to
at
play
any
the
sort of
stock
discount-
market game, though, his
Yeah.
value is probably at the beginning of the logarithmic uptick, and so
Yeah.
I would still try to buy him right now if I could.
Well, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring him up with Richardson, because I think if you've got Richardson and you like Richardson and you want to hold on to that, maybe you could go acquire Kyler from the guy and find out, maybe there's an option you can get some other points off your roster. If you're truly trying to tank, And I do think both of those guys are going to be top 10 quarterbacks, in my opinion. But I mean, Greg here in the chat, friend of the show, Greg, no 2 injury prone QBs. I mean, I don't disagree with that logic, Greg, but sometimes you got to take some risk. You got to get some risk it for the biscuit. You know what I mean? What do you think on that one, Ronnie?
I just want to throw out, I said all of that, but I don't love Kyler. I don't own him in Dynasty. Too many red flags.
I don't have any more. I don't think I have any more for him either. I think I got rid of the 1 or 2 shares I had right when he got injured, just because I was like, I went off this ride. Like, I don't know where it's going, and I don't like the direction.
I think
the
unique value proposition with him right now is simply that his market share value is going to rise over the next 2 to 3 months. So if you can get in before it peaks, which it might actually over the next 3 or 4 months, then you sell him. That's what my move would be, and I do that sometimes.
And I think I like Kyler in general a little more than you guys, but that was where the shares I have are all basically from this year, buying low, because nobody liked it. Everybody wanted to sell him this offseason. So, and again, like Ronnie just said, his value is going to rise once he returns, once he puts up a couple good fantasy games and he shows he's at least healthy for now. Then you will be able to sell him for more, especially then if you got him in like April or something. You'll be able to sell him a lot more. But even like Ronnie said, if you get him now, I think his value is going to increase.
I would agree. And I think Scott would talk about this in a portfolio sense and say, now would be the time to sell if you bought him low. Like, let's get out on some of these shares, all that kind of thing. I definitely think there's some value in getting rid of him and taking some profit better than none and kind of not risking. That's fine too. I think there's plenty of ways you can play this, but I'm excited to see what happens with that. The other stuff I want to talk about, I guess, the other stuff I put in the news, the Rams backfield is a mess now. This is not what we wanted, right? We had Kyron Williams kind of coming out of nowhere and dominating that backfield, and then he gets hurt. And then they put in Ronnie Rivers, not Ronnie Evans, Ronnie Rivers to that backfield, and he gets hurt and he gets put on IR too. So now the Rams are looking at, Zach Evans and maybe what's the
Daryl Henderson. Daryl Henderson was in the middle of a 72-hour Call of Duty marathon when they got the call to suit up. So
I believe Royce Freeman is there.
Royce Freeman, it's like Royce Freeman is another option. So now we have I'll be honest, and I don't know anybody that is going to be confident on this. We don't have a clue what this backfield is going to look like, right? Like there's a lot of people out there saying one thing or the other, or assuming one thing or the other. We have no clue. And I said this actually on the FYF, the Front Yard Fantasy Show on Tuesday. I was like, it makes me just not want any of them really at this point. I kind of want to put them all on my bench and just sort of see what happens, but I don't feel comfortable starting any of them at this point. So I'm just kind of waiting to see,
You got me amped up. This is
go ahead, Ryan.
That's the guy that's behind me right now. So Puka Nacua has flourished before Cooper Kupp came back, and he's still playing somewhat the same role, but they're both intermingling and underneath routes. But now that the Rams are going to theoretically lose their rushing threat, let's say that Zach Evans is the guy. Is he there? Am I mixing that up? Who am I thinking?
No, Zach Evans. He's the rookie there. Yeah.
Brain fart. So let's say that he is the running back this week. They're not going to be able to rely on the running being the way they have, and the underneath routes are going to become their rushing attack in many ways. And so Puka Nacua, if you look at his splits, I don't know they have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but he dominated. He dominated on, like, you ever played Madden, the little drag route?
Yeah.
Like 50% of his catches came from that. The game plan that is going to move forward if they have to move the ball downfield and put up with any sort of flack from their defense is going to have to come when underneath plays and then deep shots to Cooper Kupp and occasionally to Atwell. I think Puka might be a smash this week, and he might rebound big time. but I
You're
don't
getting
know.
ahead of me.
I'm not touching the running backs. I'm sorry.
No. It's okay. You're going right where I thought you would go because you have Puka in the background. Is that this backfield's a mess, and I don't really want any of them. But you know who I want more this week is Puka and Tutu. Which what a great you got Cup, Puka, and Tutu. Like what a name group these guys have. But I'm with you. I think all of these receivers are going to see a lot more little dump offs. They're going to see a lot of bubble screens. You're going to have the passing game be the running game, I think. And that's kind of where I'm more excited about the passing attack and the receivers than I am about the running backs. Rocky, what are your thoughts though on this whole Rams situation right now? Are you invested in any of them in Dynasty? Are you catching any of them? Are you picking them up on waivers? What are you thinking with these guys?
I think you guys pretty much nailed it with the whole Puka thing and the passing game. In terms of the running backs, I mean, those kind of backup guys are sometimes interesting to pick up. I guess some in this case, like a Royce Freeman is probably even on waivers in a lot of dynasty leagues. So I would be willing to throw Fab at him just to see. I mean, I'm not. Kyron is. It doesn't sound like more than a month at most is what it's, at least from what they're saying. I've heard a few weeks or something like that. So I'm not that interested in actually acquiring any of these guys. And like you said, I think it's a giant mess. I don't expect any guy to kind of have the role Kyron Williams did. I mean, hell, when Cam Akers was there, he didn't have the role Kyron Williams did.
Right.
So I don't think that any of them is. I have some Zach Evans shares just from drafting him late in rookie draft. So I'm kind of hoping he's the guy. I can use him for a game or two. That's kind of, I have the Puka. Actually, all three of these guys, Puka, I have some shares for the same reason, and then Kyron from I didn't even know how many Kyron shares I had until he started going off at the beginning of this year. I didn't even realize I had him like 8 or 9 leagues. I was like, wow. So it's kind of a bummer there, but I'm not really interested in any of the other guys until he comes back.
Yeah, I was only interested in Kyron because he had the full job. It was a volume type play,
Yes.
and I don't know where the volume's going to go, so I'm kind of out, right? And I do think it goes to the passing game, which is going to be fun. Another backfield that could be kind of a mess, and we'll see what happens is the Dolphins' backfield. And Jeff Wilson is now looking like he's likely to return with Raheem Mostert and Savon Ahmed kind of all taking over with Devon Chan not being there anymore. I think this
Speaking
is again
of
one of
injury
those.
prone, by the way, is that the most injury prone backfield in like history,
Maybe.
in NFL history?
Yeah, this is one of those things where I don't know who to bet on because at any minute, any one of them could go down and the other blows up. It's almost the exact opposite of the Rams, where I feel like none of them are starting. It's almost like all of them are starting because you never know where the other guy's going to go. I did write about Jeff Wilson a little bit this week in a Sleepers article for Fantasy Pros. I just think he could be the guy because he's been there a pretty long time. He is very fast and knows the offense. And Raheem Mostert, they obviously don't like giving him all the carries. So it's kind of like, man, we'll see what happens. We'll just kind of play it by ear. We'll kind of maybe Jeff Wilson is the guy to go. But Ronnie, what are your thoughts on the Dolphins backfield? I guess where should we go with that? Where would you go?
I have always, even heading into the season. Now I'm forgetting his name. We literally just said it. Not Jeff Wilson. The
Raheem Mostert. Savon Ahmed,
Devin Achane.
Ahmed's always been kind of the afterthought for me. But I think you want to have whoever the healthy running back is heading into the week. Number one on the depth chart, they're probably an RB1. And it's a ridiculous offense. It sounds ridiculous to even say that, but you could go plug in Salvon Ahmed, and I think he'd be an RB1. If he got the work.
It's that kind of offense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to roster any of them. It's hard to make any predictions because it all relies on injury. But right now, I think Raheem Mostert's going to be the RB1 over the next 4 weeks, and I like in all of fantasy. It's my bold prediction, and I'm not worried about Wilson and these other guys.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, we got Greg in the chat here saying his stud to sit this week is Mostert. And I mean, sitting Mostert is an interesting.
I disagree with that, Greg.
I don't know if I would do that, but I like that. That's a bold call. I'll give you that one, Greg.
The Eagles' run D has been good, and their secondary is trash, and their one decent safety is hurt. And
They got Nakobe Dean coming back this week, so that is a point in favor for Greg. If there's anyone on any NFL defense right now that can go and keep up with the Dolphins running backs, it's probably Nakobe Dean at middle linebacker.
But I'm with you on Mostert though, especially while Achane is out, and we saw too that the two of them could coexist even when they're both there and be RB1s even. But yeah, I until he hurts something else, I love Mostert. Mostert's been ridiculous. I would throw a second at Mostert right now, even if he's only the starter for the next month. Like I said, if he can stay healthy, even if he doesn't and he comes back in December in your playoffs, he can pop off a big gain at any time. He's still fast, even though he's like 30.
Yeah.
It seems crazy to me. He's 30. He's like, I guess he had a late start kind of especially being able to be a starter. It wasn't until probably like 4 or 5 years ago with the Niners or whoever that was. But yeah, I just think exactly what Ronnie said. I love Mostert. It was a super cheap guy. You could get this offseason. Nobody was even looking to acquire Mostert. If you got him, it was probably as a throw in a bigger deal or something like that. So, and the fact that is he still the RB1? I don't know if he might be behind the RB2 behind McCaffrey at this point, but I know he's
2 now.
Yeah.
Depending on format too, but yeah.
That offense is just generating fantasy points at a ridiculous pace. So,
can I throw in one note in favor of Greg? I was actually in that Twitter space where he brought up Mostert, and it was they pick guys that they think might not finish in the top 12 that have currently been in the top 12 of the position for the week. So that was all. His only take on Mostert was that he might disappoint based on expectations in this matchup, which I do think is a very real possibility.
And I do think he has a point in the chat that Wilson is the biggest spec. That's the one thing that worries me, that he could be now the goal line guy, because especially when all three or when Achan's healthy, he's a smaller guy.
What if all three are RB1s every week?
Well, if any offense can do it, it's probably Miami, right? They're just ridiculous right now. We've already kind of talked a little bit about week 5, but I want to keep going a little bit further. I think that there were some pros and cons to last week, and I don't know if there's anything we want to get too deep on. I know looking back is always kind of fun, but I'm much more a fan of looking ahead. But anything you want to talk about looking back on week 6, Rocky, and then we'll look ahead to week 7. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here.
Looking back at week 6, and I saw you put this on the sheet, and it's kind of something we're doing most weeks. The one that occurred to me, it's really kind of the past couple weeks, it's been interesting to see, is Pitts and London. The Atlanta passing game has actually picked up, which has been interesting to see. And I'm not sure if that continues, but it's certainly very encouraging. I think London went over 100 yards last week. Pitts had a touchdown, I believe 2 weeks ago. Pitts actually had like 70, 80 yards and like a handful of catches. So it's something to keep an eye on. It's not like Ritter was great though, because he did throw 3 picks. So from a real NFL, from a fantasy perspective, he was fine. From a real NFL perspective, not so great. And they did lose the game, but I don't like Ritter that much, but if they actually give him some volume, those weapons are so good. And he actually, I think Russ had mentioned, I think I think it was attempted or I think it was completed 28 passes the last 2 weeks, which was, I would never have believed the Falcons would complete 56 passes over 2 weeks, because between Arthur Smith's penchant to run the ball and Ritter not being very good, but the fact that those weapons are coming on after, like, everyone's ready to give Kyle Pitts up for dead at this point, like 3 weeks into the season. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes going forward. Bijan needs to pick it up a little, but it was nice to see London and Pitts not going off, but looking very start worthy the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, and on that QB note, one of the things I was really excited about in week 6 was Jared Goff again kind of dominating in a league that nobody thought he could dominate in. Everybody was kind of writing him off after that Stafford trade. They felt like, Goff is just getting thrown away. His contract is terrible. And here he is, QB3 for the second week in a row.
Yeah.
Lions are kind of on a tear right now, right? I don't think anybody expected that outcome in Tampa Bay. Everybody was kind of worried about him going, not playing well in away games and all this. And Goff comes out and just does it again. And I just think that he's one of those underrated kind of players that I'm just really excited to see how the rest of the season goes, both for him and the Lions, really. I think that it's just fun to watch a team like the Lions, and the lack of kneecaps doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, Dan Campbell's bitten them all off, and it doesn't matter. We're just excited to be here. So I was actually the only one I really wanted to bring up was Jared Goff. But Ronnie, anything for you on the week 6 look back? Anybody that you're excited about?
Yeah, man. Where are all the young guys? All right. It's just old. It's just old players.
Rocky's in heaven.
We got Raheem Mostert, #1 player in fantasy last week. Tyreek Hill, about to be 30. Tua and Amon-Ra will ignore you. Thielen, Cooper Kupp, Jared Goff. He's not old, but he feels old. Travis Kelce. The Minnesota Vikings defense was a top 10 play last week. Half of them are like 50 years old. I don't know what's going on, but I need the as a Dynasty and a Debbie guy. There's plenty of young guys that did well last week, but I thought it was interesting. I think it was 7 of the top 10 individual players last week were over the age of 30.
No, I like it. I think that's an interesting angle to take on it too, because age sometimes in Dynasty you can forget that the old guys can score points, right? Rocky, you're a big fan of old people.
Yeah, I am an old person, but
we all are. Let's be honest.
But even on the season, not even just last week, there's a lot of like Mostert is RB2 on the season. Christian McCaffrey is 27. I mean, that's not old, but for a running back, that's pretty up there.
Yeah.
Thielen, I think, is like wide receiver 3 on the season. It's a lot of the old guys. Yeah,
Keenan Allen number 4 still.
Keenan Allen, yep.
If this persists, we should host an industry-wide like bingo game during championship week.
And it's funny you mentioned Goff, Andrew, though, because
and I know
looking at that was one of the guys I also thought of. Goff is like super underrated. Like he was doing this last year too. I don't know where he finished QB wise, but he was a QB1, I think.
9, I think.
Yeah, I just he has no value. Well, not no value, but nowhere near the value. He's becoming the new Kirk Cousins almost to me.
I like that comparison. That's good.
Yeah, he doesn't have the mobility, but he's doing enough passing wise, and I wouldn't have expected it when he went to Detroit, but they've done a great job there building up the weapons. Goff's actually playing well, and at least by trade addict scoring, he's QB5 on the year, which is a little different with passing yards in a lot of leagues. But
he's QB4. He's tied for QB4 with a dead on tied at QB4 with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah,
if you'd have told me back in August that through 6 weeks Mahomes and Goff would have identical points, I would have been like, I don't believe you. What happened to Mahomes? You know what I mean? Like,
which would have been a fair question.
Right. And they're adding Jamison Williams now for he's as he gets up to speed. So I mean, there's even more potential there. So and Jahmyr Gibbs has been out for a couple weeks.
Yeah, and you mentioned Kirk Cousins. Greg just brought him up in the chat again. Kirk Cousins is QB8 on the season, which again, like that's pretty stellar for and losing Justin Jefferson and the running game there being kind of on the never know what you're going to get. I think it's interesting just to see some of these older guys that I know, Rocky, you talk about it a lot, that are usually considered like a QB2. Goff and Cousins are 2 of the perfect QB2 kind of options. We talk about that a lot. And they're both top 10. I mean, they're
totally dynasty QB2s. Nobody has them in their dynasty top 12, but
correct.
They can give you low end 1 production.
Yep. And we're seeing it now. So if you're contending, if you've got those guys on your team, you're probably contending. Let's just put it that way.
Yep.
With that, we're going to pivot to look ahead now to week 7. There are 6 teams on a bye this week. This is the Binado. I believe Heath Cummings is the one that coined that term, and I'm just going to keep using it because I think it's great. And Bipocalypse sounds just too negative for me, but it's just a whirlwind of buys. We've got Carolina Panthers, Cincinnati Bengals, Dallas Cowboys, Houston Texans, New York Jets, and Tennessee Titans. There's a lot of fantasy relevant players on those teams. I'm nervous. It's like that GIF of Ralph Wiggum in the bus. I'm scared. Like that's what it reminds me of, because a lot of my lineups are just, there are some bad ones. I think there was one I had to pick somebody up. All of my bench was on a bye. I'm like, well, that's going to be interesting. So I needed to fill a spot, and I had to drop somebody. This is what happens. We get some of these weeks in the NFL. I think week 8, or is it week 10? One of those weeks, there's no buys. They get like a gap in the middle where everybody plays again, and then there's buys again. I don't know what they're thinking here. But with that, I know, Ronnie, you did a lot of great work on the sheet. I'll kick it to you first. I usually just like to say anybody that you're higher on or lower on. Like, is there anybody that you think we should be looking out for? Like, what are your thoughts on week 7?
Yeah, I love this type of stuff. So I've got my iPad pulled up here next to the camera, and then the football game's actually over on my TV against the wall over there. That's why I keep looking off. Should I watch football or keep talking to you guys?
Keep talking, please.
So quarterback, I just went position by position trying to find one guy. And one of my favorite exercises each week is to go in and review fantasy points against team defenses, but then I like to break it down over the last 4 weeks, last 6, and we're getting to that point in this season where I can start to do that in the 3 and 4 week increments, because typically week 1 and 2 don't offer too much relevant data throughout the course of the season. Right now, quarterbacks, I went and looked at Fantasy Pros ECR. I was actually very impressed. I didn't really see much in the quarterback landscape that's outside of the top 15 that I would jump in on right now. And that's a testament to how poor the quarterback landscape is this year. It's been weird.
Yeah.
Running back, Brian Robinson versus the New York Giants. He's the running back 12 in ECR. He's my running back 7 this week. I think the Giants are the 3rd or 4th worst defense against running backs, and they're missing like half their players. They're in a tough spot. I'm into it. Jackson Smith and Jigba was I think he was a penalty and a missed throw last week away from another 70 yards and a touchdown. They're using those 3 receivers in Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN in almost an interchangeable clip right now. It's equal target share for the most part. I think that this Arizona Cardinals secondary stinks. So into it. Wide receiver 48. He's a wide receiver 3 for me this week. And then lastly, Luke Musgrave. He's back. He's looking good. And he's playing the Denver Broncos. I don't need to explain that one.
I love it. That's the analysis. Hashtag analysis. He's playing the Broncos. You went through a lot there. I want to recap that. That was Tyrod Taylor. I want to say it right. Brian Robinson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Luke Musgrave. I agree with all of those. I think those are all terrific options. I've been a Brian Robinson fan all season. I feel like he's very underrated. It is kind of going as the second B Robinson in almost every league, right? And Bijan obviously warranted to be the first, but Brian has been a very stellar running back in a lot of ways, a lot of weeks. And I think it's interesting too to think back, like we all kind of expected Antonio Gibson to be that guy, and then he wasn't. And then we were like, well, Brian Robinson got shot in the leg, and then is he going to play? Is he going to come back? And like, I don't know. Is he really? He's outperformed my expectations. Let's just put it that way. For the year, he's RB15 in PPR. Yeah. I mean, like Brian Robinson for RB15, I would have been like, nah, I don't think so. Like that's top half of the NFL. That's pretty damn stellar. And that's with two Dolphins ahead of him. You know what I mean? With both Jan and Mostert, both being in the top 6, according to the latest scoring in PPR. But yeah, I love Brian Robinson. I thought that was a terrific pick. And I completely agree with that. Rocky, you got any comments on these players that Ronnie brought up?
Yeah, I mean, I like all those. I mean, Smith and Jigman scares me a little bit, just the way they've been using him. A lot of real short stuff. But I mean, you're kind of digging deep if you're talking about JSN anyway. So why not take the shot? And I love the Musgrave. Well, I didn't really break this down as much as Ronnie did. I was basically just looking, and one of my ideas was, start your Packers. The Broncos defense is a dumpster fire. So get him at Aaron Jones, Romeo Dobbs, anybody, just throw him in there. I think you should be in for a pretty good day. And there's no, the only other thing I was looking at, I was just looking at the schedule Ronnie was talking, and there's no like lower level guys really to recommend. So this doesn't really help anybody, but I expect the Eagles Dolphins game is just going to be massive points. I know it's the highest over under on the slate, but I think it's going to live up to that. I think you're going to see a major shootout. But like I said, that's like Waddle and Hill and Mostert and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and DeAndre. Like none of those guys are like guys you're not expecting stuff from. So
they're all locked and loaded. I think so. Yeah, I think I've heard.
He's got a hand. He's got. They did sit him and said he's got a hamstring soreness or something like that, but it doesn't sound like he's not going to play.
Okay, good.
I think it should be pretty good. And I know Greg has brought this up a couple times in the chat. Craig Reynolds, he keeps mentioning Craig Reynolds, which I love Craig Reynolds. Don't get me wrong, Greg. There's a second.
I hope Craig Reynolds has a good week.
I hope so too.
He has a good week because I have a family and friends league that I co-run with my son, and we have Craig Reynolds starting this week in our RB2.
That was who I had to pick up because of bye weeks was Craig Reynolds. I was like, he was on waivers, and I was like, I think he might actually be the guy. I'm not sure if Gibbs is going to play. Montgomery's definitely out. They don't seem to want to use Gibbs too heavily, even though I think they should. Like Craig Reynolds could get 3 touchdowns. We have no idea. So again, I think that's a fine play. And Detroit is playing well. Again, if you want to go with the narrative kind of angle, you could look at it like they're probably going to be ahead and need to ice the game. And you're much more willing to give Craig Reynolds junk touches than Jameer Gibbs getting hurt. You know what I mean?
They got the big boys up front.
I was just going to say, even if Gibbs is playing this week, he's just coming back off injury too. So how much work are they really? They weren't giving him a ton of work
again
when he wasn't hurt. So
Greg providing a ton of content. This is awesome. He says Gibbs will play. I completely agree. I think Gibbs will play.
I think so too.
if they're going to use him correctly, because they haven't done that yet. And I don't see them leaning on him because, again, they haven't done that yet. So I wouldn't be shocked if they lean on Craig Reynolds if they're ahead. There's just no reason to risk it. So I love Craig Reynolds this week. I think that's a great pick too. To go back to Tyrod Taylor, I think that's an interesting angle. I would rather not play Tyrod Taylor. I think this is one of those weeks. I'm in one. I think there's at least one league where my super flex is not a quarterback, right? Where like I don't have the quarterbacks because I've invested heavily in Burrow. Being a Bengals fan, of course, I've got a lot of Bryce Young, which I think is, I think he's going to be good. I got a lot of CJ Stroud too, because I had a lot of teams where I wanted to get those quarterbacks. All those guys are on a bye this week. If I have Ryan Tannehill in some leagues because he's dirt cheap and it might not be the greatest decision anyway, but he's on a bye. You got Dak on a bye. Like all these quarterbacks are on a bye. So there's definitely one or two leagues where I know I'm starting a receiver in my super flex, and I'm not really that scared about it. I think that's something we don't talk about enough, is that sometimes starting a Tyrod Taylor in your super flex because he's a quarterback might not be the right answer here, right? Like, let's be careful. We saw this on Sunday. Like, sometimes these backups are backups for a reason. And even if Daniel Jones plays, I'm not sure I'm too stoked about that, just because of the re-injury concern. And that team has been kind of all over the place. Like, I'm not set on. Yeah, I'm just not set on any. They just lost another starter too, I heard this week. Yeah. Like again, you saw it last week too. Like I think it was Justin Pugh, right straight off the couch. Like they're literally that desperate, and that means I don't want anyone on the Giants in my roster.
Let me defend my dignity here.
Go ahead.
Quarterback, none. Tyrod.
I was going to say, I don't think
Ronnie entirely fair.
Taylor either.
I just wanted to mention
the whole, just in case.
I just wanted to mention the whole. You don't have to start a QB in your superflex. This is the kind of week where you don't, right? Because you're stretching it a little thinner with the 6 teams on bye. You're looking at options that are backups or replacements or on bad offenses. You don't have to do that. Don't force it, please. Don't make that. Sure, there's somebody out there listening to this that is like, I got to start a quarterback there. You don't. You really don't. You might have a 5th receiver that outscores Tyrod Taylor. And I agree with your none. That was the right answer.
Yeah, and just to back up your point, I have a couple contending dynasty teams where I am not starting a certain quarterback every week. Like I have one startable quarterback, but I am loaded up enough at the other positions that like you can do it. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't do it across most of my super flex leagues, but you can get away with it if the rest of your team is good enough. So especially in a week where you might have to throw a Taylor in or somebody even worse. I wouldn't necessarily be doing that depending on what else you have on your roster.
Yeah, and we've seen some of the find me a trades even where there are some teams with 4 or even 5 starting quarterbacks. Like I've got one rebuilding team where I've got 5 starting quarterbacks in theory anyway, right? But they're all quarterbacks 20 to 30. You know what I mean? Like none of them are good quarterbacks. They're all just like flyers. And then you've got other teams where you've got Pat Mahomes and Stetson Bennett, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like there's just nothing else. And it's like, that's not the bad idea either. You can zig when others are zagging. So don't be afraid to make that decision. I know sometimes it can be tough only clicking one checkbox in MFL on QB and being like, is that really all I got? That's all I got. That's all we're going with.
Yeah.
You got a big guy. That's all you need, right? I'm with you entirely. Anything else you guys want to bring up about week 7 other than the stuff we've discussed? I think we covered it pretty well. Rocky, anything from you? Ronnie, anything?
Nope.
Perfect. I'm excited for football, as always. So that's all I really want. Just no injuries. That's always what just no injuries. Injuries make this game much more frustrating.
Team this year is like ridiculous.
Yeah. The injury team would be good. Justin Jefferson alone, right? You're already doing well. We're going to move on to the next segment of our show. And this trade, I think, happened on Thursday last week, but I didn't put it on the sheet because we already had a trade and I wanted to save it in case we didn't have another one. And we didn't have another one. And it also brings up one of the players you mentioned, Ronnie. This was in DJ2 this week. With one of the best fantasy team names I have ever seen. And I'll be honest, I'm a big Office fan. I never thought of this one. It's Trey Lance, Lance Refrigeration. That's brilliant. I'm sorry, you win. That's a brilliant team name. But Trey Lance, Lance Refrigeration sent away Jackson Smith and Jigba to Fantasy Timeline, to our co-host Drew and his co-manager Josh, for Tony Pollard. So Jackson Smith and Jigba for Tony Pollard. Rocky, I want to kick it to you first. When you saw this trade come through, what did you think about this? Which side would you prefer? Give us your breakdown.
I actually think that's a really fair trade in terms of contending, not contending, obviously, is what it seems like. I don't remember we have 3 Junkies leagues. I don't remember. I assume that's what this is, though.
Yes.
And yeah, so, Tony Pollard hasn't been knocking it out of the park, so, but neither is JSN coming out, as a rookie either. So that does, not that people are you're getting JSN cheap. I don't think Tony Pollard is cheap to get him, but it's maybe a little less value than you might have gotten, had he had a better start. So if I want to win this year, I love getting Tony Pollard. I still think that offense is going to be pretty good. He's definitely had his had some good games here. I think he can get into the low end RB1 territory. He was there last year. He was, I think, like RB9 or something like that. As much as I like Jason, and I do believe he will succeed, he's not doing it yet, and we don't know. I mean, you never know. So you may be. It seems like Ronnie thinks he does know, but I do believe he's going to be a good player in this league. It's just not, he's got the other 2 guys there, and they're not using them great right now. But anyway, but there's still the chance that this really pans out for you if JSN never hits. But either way, I think it's a fair trade. I love getting those points right now.
Yeah, and just to kind of back your point up before I give it to you, Ronnie, Trey Lance Refrigeration is 4-2, and Fantasy Timeline guys are 2-4. So Lance Refrigeration sent Jackson Smith and Jigba for Tony Pollard as a contending team. I totally get that. Like you said, like that makes sense. And then as a rebuilding option or kind of pivoting to the future, I think Jackson Smith and Jigba might have a longer career and might be worth more in a year, all that kind of stuff. So this is exactly that kind of trade that I think we talk about a lot during Find Me a Trade, especially where it's like, you got to pick a direction. This is the kind of trade that picks a direction. You know what I mean? Like Jackson Smith and Jigba is a project player. He's a young kid. He's going to get better. He's a stud. He's got a ton of talent. I'm not too worried about his future, but I'm kind of worried about his now. And Pollard is kind of the opposite, right? Like running backs are not necessarily the longest asset to invest in. So could be interesting on that. But Ronnie, what are your thoughts on this trade?
I think it's dope. I would love it. If I was a contender and I got to get a starting running back, like a top 10 running back, and I didn't have to give up a first next year, that's sick. I think it's cool. It doesn't happen in my league.
That's dope. I love it. Yeah, it's very 90s, like your background.
I also particularly love it because Trey Lance doesn't matter. I don't think people really process that the San Francisco 49ers and the administration there basically said, we screwed up so badly here that we are willing to put our jobs on the line and take whatever we can get for this player. We mortgaged our future for him. They did a great job managing the team. Otherwise, obviously, the 49ers are still there, thanks in part to hitting on the double of Tom Brady. But dude, why is anyone picking up Trey Lance? Who cares?
Well, no, we're not talking about Trey Lance. Let's be clear. Trey Lance is not involved in this trade.
I know.
I just the team name. I just think it's awesome.
Yeah. This makes so much more sense. Yeah. I kept looking at it.
I was like, what are you talking about?
I was like, Trey Lance. I don't care that he's in the trade.
I'm with you. And I think that Trey Lance doesn't matter at all. But to pivot back, Jackson Smith and Jigba, I know you're a fan of, and that's a huge one. And that's a big part of this trade, obviously. And then Tony Pollard, I think Greg even here in the chat is like, he's not a fan of this. Greg is saying not an even trade, but you can't legislate against stupidity. I don't know, Greg. I think I agree. You can't legislate against stupidity.
I mean, he says also like team's wide receiver 3 for. I mean, in redraft, it's not a fair trade. In
redraft, it's terrible.
Dynasty, yeah.
No, but I still don't think it's really that great a trade in Dynasty. I'm with Greg.
I would rather have the Pollard side, but I get the logic, is what I'm saying. I would rather have Pollard.
Like
I think Pollard. DTC agrees. Pollard is worth on their scale 23.1 in a 14-team league like this one, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is worth 20. So they're close. But again, I probably would have wanted more if I'm sending Pollard. But if that's what you can get, then that's what you can get, right? Like I don't mind that logic. And in a 14-teamer, sometimes you got to make a little bit of a crazy trade here and there. And anything within 10% is fine. This is just outside of that. I don't really mind too much. So I think it's an interesting trade and definitely something that is worth talking about. And maybe others are doing the same. But I would rather have Pollard too. I'm with you.
Unless my team is so bad.
Well, yeah, exactly. Unless you're just like punting everything, right? Yeah. Let's do a quick rundown of the leagues just so that we're kind of going through it. We do this. Sorry, been doing this all season. DJ1, the Junkies team is 6-3. We're doing all right. We're getting through it with some double headers there. Funky Bunch and Gators Bitches are still tied together at 8-1 now, tied for first. So I know that's the other thing I love about this is I get to read some fun team names. In DJ2, the one that we just went through, that was that same league. Rocky and Scott and myself. So both of our teams are 3-3 right in the middle. And Andrew Ember's team is still 5-1.
Rocky and Scott's team is trash though and shouldn't even have 3 wins. We're rebuilding and don't want to have 3 wins.
I was actually going to ask if you even knew you were 3-3 was my question, like, because your team was not supposed to be that good. You were going into the season almost in a rebuild, and now you're even, which
rookie did you hit on? Puka, A-Chain?
I don't remember which
Anthony
one it was.
Richardson for the first few games.
Yeah.
Well, you have a very low points total, like a potential points and everything, but you got Justin
we haven't
Fields,
done
Desmond
that well. Yeah. We had Justin Fields blew up. I think that got us a win, and it's basically Fields,
Jalen Warren, lots of running backs, Brees Hall, like it's Imari DiMercado. I think you picked up. That was an interesting move. Like there's some fun on that team. It could be good, but your receivers are trash, man. Like you got Marquise Brown, and that's about it, right? Cortland Sutton. You had A.T. Perry on your roster. Like, what are you doing? But that's the thing about this league, and that's the thing about any league, really. In a 14-teamer, it gets desperate, but you never know. You could always win a game you don't deserve it, and that's something that we see often. DJ2 is a fun one, though. It's a good group, and I'm glad they're here. We actually have DJ3, though. We have an update there, too. All of us are on that Chaos team together, which is fun, and we're 4-2 with 9 victory points, tied for first with Trading Places, who is technically in first by record as the tiebreak. So again, that's a fun one, and we're getting through that one. So all 3 of these leagues are similar but different, and that's what we love about them. So again, thank you so much for everybody being in those leagues. It's been a lot of fun so far, and we're looking forward to some more as we go through the rest of this. Rocky, did you have anything you wanted to cover on the leagues before we move on to our final segment of the night?
Nope. Let's get to Find Me a Trade.
That's what I was hoping you would say, because it's my favorite segment of the evening.
Find me a trade.
That's right, Brian. Find me a trade. This is where we find a trade for one of our listeners. This week is submitted by Jesse Schott, who is one of our listeners. I think he's in the DJ3 league, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Rocky?
Yeah, I think so. It's 2 or 3.
I feel like I should know that, but it's 2 or 3. I'm pretty sure it's 3 for some reason. But Jesse, thank you for being in the league, whichever one you're in. Let me see if it is 2. It is 2 because he's Bing Pot, which is, again, one of my favorite team names of all time, I think. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Point being, this is, yes, that is his team, Bing Pot, in number 2. This is a one-hit wonders league. And Rocky, before the show started, you told me that this is actually a league that you commission and run that I did not know. Yes. So last week, we waited forever to get Andrew Ember into the system, and we waited since April, I think. And then Jesse submits a league, and we do it the exact same next week with you on the show like an idiot, and I didn't even look it up. So we'll save your trade for last. But this is a one-hit wonders league. I want you to talk about that when we get there. But his team is Semisonic, terrific one-hit wonder. Big fan of that. It's a 12-team Superflex PPR, full 1 point extra for tight end premium. And tell me if any of this is wrong, Rocky, since it's your league.
Oh, no, it's not wrong. It's a crazy league.
Well, I'm just saying it's 12 team. Like all of this is correct so far, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think you're going to talk about the stuff that's coming up. That's the crazy part.
No, this is where it does get crazy. Yeah. So it's a 12-team start 12, where it's 1 QB, 3 running back, 4 receiver, tight end, 2 flex, and a super flex. I don't like 3 running back leagues. I don't like 4 receiver leagues, and this is both. So that's exciting. I'll pull up the league and pull up his team. No, I don't blame you. I'll pull up the league if you want to read his quick little thoughts, because he doesn't even have much to say, to be honest. It's pretty straightforward what his plan is, or lack of a plan, I guess.
Yeah, so he took over an orphan that I think won last year, which it did. He's right. And honestly, not sure if I should go all in, go for QB and push for a win or not. Need help with the direction I should be taking with this team.
And I will say this too, since you're in the league, Rocky, you're not allowed to provide any real commentary, because it'll all be skewed by your opinions. Sort of.
Okay.
You could just say, Jesse, just give me all your players. That doesn't make sense. You can definitely add commentary. I'm just kidding. But I do want to start, Ronnie, with your trade first. I know, looking at the sheet, you put a lot of notes together for this. So I'm curious, I guess, what you. Yeah. Well, let me before we get into the trade. Let me read the team. I forgot. I got to read the team first. This is Semisonic's team, or Jesse's team. He's got Matt Stafford, Ryan Tannehill, Gardner Minshew, Daniel Jones, Andy Dalton, and some scrubs there left over at quarterback. Running back, he's got Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, Chase Edmonds, Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, Kareem Hunt, Cam Akers. So some good names there, some good options. Receiver is, in my opinion, probably his strongest position. He's got Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, Devontae Adams. Maybe not his strongest, I guess. I forgot. Corey Davis, Devontae Parker. Not that great. Tight end, he's got Travis Kelce and a bunch of other players. Tyler Higbee, Mo Alley Cox, Jonnu Smith, some other names you might have heard of. But overall, this team is a little bit rough. I will say that. It does look like it's right in the middle of the pack, which is exactly what the standings show. But then, Ronnie, yes, sorry for the cutoff there. What was your thoughts on this team, and what would you do if you were Jesse?
All right, Jesse. I've been playing fantasy football for 2 decades. I said it earlier. There's a guy in our chat right now who's been playing fantasy football since the 1980s. You came to the right place.
Yes.
I've done Dynasty for 14 years, and I would fold this team like immediately, especially if you have a trade deadline coming up. Because currently speaking, I'm going to read off my notes here. You got a number of anchors that are in their final window, ranging from like Kelce to Kamara. Considering that the league is super flex and the marriage of your quarterback situation with the standings plus the lucrativeness of next year's class, I think you've got the ability right now to move multiple veterans that are heading towards the end of their relevancy for some pretty serious cap. I think that you can move guys like Hill and Kelce. I know it probably really hurts to move on from Hill, but let's remember that he said he might retire like next year, maybe the year after, but I don't think he's long for the league. He's a speed freak too, guys that hit the 30, 31-year-old age, especially with his workload. I'm moving out on Hill if I'm not contending right now. Kelce, same thing. You could probably get a first plus for Kelce and maybe even Kamara, but definitely Kelce in a super flex league right now. Maybe around a first for Adams. I would just throw away all of your quarterbacks. But here's the deal. I didn't put in a trade in the notes, so I pulled up your league and I went directly to the 6-0 team, achy breaky heart. This guy has Josh Allen, Jordan Love, Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. I would go ahead and send him Matthew Stafford in a trade. I would put that into the trade first. Then I would go in and try and entice him to swap Alvin Kamara and Brian Robinson with you. I think Brian Robinson has 4 to 5 years of relevancy. He's really good. And he serves a role that as long as that coaching staff stays in place for the next half decade, he is going to be a featured back. And then if you can, he's got Luke Schoonmaker, who doesn't really mean a lot to me, but he could be something down the road. I liked his profile coming out. If you could go give this guy Travis Kelce, I think you might be able to pull for those 3 players, throwing in Kelce there at the end and pulling in Schoonmaker, 2 first this year, next year, plus a second, and take your pick of wide receivers. I'd want to pull in Marvin Mims and Jacoby Myers and maybe swap him Devontae Adams. If you sent him that whole thing and said, hey, we don't have to do all of this, but you can take pieces of this and let's talk. You might piss off all your league mates, which is really fun because you help the best team. And you walk out of this thing just sitting pretty, kick back, relax, head into one of the best draft classes in a decade, and just reap the benefits next year.
I like that. I like where your head's at. And obviously my trade is similar, but obviously this is exactly what I would say too, is you have to pick a direction. And I don't know if your direction is going to be contending, right? I don't know if I see that as being easy or fun. We're through 6 weeks, just started the 7th. You're really going to have to grind it out to get up to the top, especially because this team is 3-3. But the top teams are outscoring you by, 20 points a week at this point. Like you're not going to get there without a massive give up. And I don't know if it'd be worth it. I'm kind of with you, Ronnie. I'd look at this and say, all right, let's punt a little bit. Let's try to go get some picks. Obviously, this is a very serious league if Rocky is running it. So let's be careful. But again, I don't think that you're going to have a lot of people in this league that are going to be, throwing firsts away. They're going to be wanting to get their value back. But I think your valuations are pretty close. I think the one thing you said too, multiple firsts for Hill and Kelce. I think Kelce you might have a hard time getting multiple firsts for him, but I think first in a young player could work, that kind of mentality. And I think Hill, you're on the right track there too. I think moving Hill as scoring as he's doing, like he's crushing it right now. Some of those other teams, other than Achy Breaky Heart, might be interested in that to kind of put them over the top, right? So I think your head's at where I was going to go. Rocky, I'll wait to get your input until after I give my trade, so you can kind of go all at once since you're in this league. But mine was in the same kind of vein that you mentioned, which is let's send Stafford. I don't need Stafford on this roster. And my thought was, I don't need Keenan Allen on this roster. I don't need Travis Kelce on this roster. No, hang on. Keenan's not on the roster anymore, which is what Rocky's going to get into.
We'll get to that.
Okay. Keenan Allen was on the roster, But Keenan Allen, Travis Kelce, Matt Stafford, and hell, Gardner Minshew, pick another quarterback. Send that all to achy breaky heart for Josh Allen. And there are two thoughts I had with this. Achy breaky heart is 6-0, but is not the leader in scoring. He's actually third, I think, in scoring behind two of the teams that are 5-1. So in my mind, I'm like, achy breaky heart might be looking at this like, I squeaked into 6-0. I'm getting lucky. I need to make some moves, right? And I think that's where you might be able to take advantage of some of that kind of twist, right?
Yeah.
The other thing, like you said before too, is this achy breaky heart has Mahomes. He has Love. He doesn't really need Allen, although I'm sure he loves having Allen and Mahomes. I know most people would. And again, Rocky, if you're achy breaky heart, that would be hilarious.
I'm not, but I am the team that leads the league in scoring. Right said. Fred.
I like it. Okay. So my other thought then is if you're sending Allen, you're sending Kelce, you're sending Stafford. Those are three starters, and there's plenty of chaff on this roster that you can get rid of. There are some. He's rostering Juwan Jennings, Xavier Hutchinson, Xavier Gibson. What was the other? Chris Moore. Like there's a bunch of you could get rid of a lot of this. And I think if you're going to win this league, you're going to have depth. He's 6-0 with Jonathan Taylor missing 4 weeks. He's 6-0 with Derrick Henry being kind of subpar and now on a bye. So this is where we start to get into bye weeks too. And week 7 is a rough one. He's got a lot of guys on 7 bye. So my thought is if I could send you some depth and get Josh Allen to help my rebuild, I'm fine to do that. However, Rocky had a different plan and decided to make a trade for Keenan Allen. So Rocky, why don't you get into that trade and then your general thoughts on the league even?
Yeah, and I do like your trade too. I do. I guess I do wonder if if they're willing to get that much age for Allen is the only thing I'd be concerned about. But I think it's a pretty fair. You're getting
Allen is a little hurt, right? He's been dinged
yeah.
up, so maybe there's some concern there. Maybe you can strike on that. Maybe I don't know. It's the only thing I can come up with for when
and
Allen
2.0 premium, especially Kelce is huge. So if they want the plan, Keenan is killing it as we talked about earlier. So speaking of which, we actually did find a trade for Jesse here because I made a trade with Jesse a couple hours before the show, which was
collusion.
Kind of. Yeah, well.
Which was it's a very basic, simple trade though. But actually, this also kind of gets into some more of the craziness of the league too. When it's not quite as simple as it seems. Where I traded him a 24-second for Keenan Allen. But a 24-second in this league isn't necessarily a 24-second because in addition to all the crazy starting requirements, in the rookie draft every year, there are firsts that are 2 years out. So in the 24 draft, you can draft 2026 firsts.
Interesting.
So
I like that
basically, from what we've only been doing this for 2 years, and the first year was the auction startup. Now we're just doing drafts from here on out. It's not auction rookie drafts. But last year, the first, and I guess it'll probably depend on the class. But last year, the future first started going towards the end of the first round. And then a lot of the second round was future first. So mine will probably be late because, like I said, I'm leading the league in points. I got a pretty good team. Receiver is probably my weakest spot, especially since you have to start 4. I'm not super deep there. But that second, even if it's not a future first, it's probably more like an early second because so much of the second round will be future first, if that all made sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's probably
and that's an interesting wrinkle I didn't know. Yeah. That's a good
he didn't put that on
I like
there.
that.
Yeah. So it's basically, even though I'm a contending team, that's really more the equivalent of either a future of a 24 early second or a 26 first, depending on where it lands and how long the first lasts, the future first lasts. But so I got Keenan Allen from, so he's kind of agreeing with us that he's, I think, starting to need to break this down. And I kind of agree too. After looking closer at his roster, because I don't necessarily just scroll through my whole league's rosters all the time.
Sure.
But looking at it for the show, I definitely did think there's a lot of nice pieces there for a win now team, but it's also kind of looks like it's going to be dying soon. So, and it's not enough now. Like you said, he's like, it's a very high scoring league because of all the starters and some of the premiums and stuff. And he's like 20 points off kind of the top 3 or 4 teams. So yeah, it makes sense for him to break it down. He's starting to do that. And I think you guys gave him some good recommendations for some other ideas. Just can't include Keenan Allen in there now.
Yeah, no, I thought that was funny. Like I come up with this and then Rocky sends me a note like, hey, I just traded Keenan Allen. I'm like, oh, well, I'm leaving my trade anyway. We'll do it. The other piece of advice I want to give you, Jesse, is you've got IR slots. Why aren't you using them? You've got Chubb and Edmonds both in your active roster. This is one of those.
Jesse!
I do that all the time because I'm in way too many
I was
leagues.
gonna say I know a lot of people that don't pay attention, but that is the in my mind, that is the biggest way to take advantage of anything you can is put those guys on IR and go grab someone else. If I'm rebuilding, this is actually something this came up on Twitter, and this is a perfect time to discuss it. If I'm rebuilding, I'm churning that back end of my roster every week. I'm looking for upside. I'm trying to hit every player I can. I give them 2 weeks. If they don't do anything, they're out of there. Like I picked up David Bell. He didn't do anything. I dropped him for Ronnie Rivers. He didn't do anything. Now he's on IR. I dropped him for whoever. You know what I mean? Like just constantly keep looking for those edges because that's where you get guys like Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua and things like that where they are not, maybe not this year because they broke out so early, but those kind of players can break out in week 7 and week 9 and week 12. Like you never know what kind of opportunity you're going to get, right? So that's where I would say, in my mind, that's the first thing I would do with this league. If I had this team is I would fill every IR spot I could. I would try to, cut Corey Davis. He's retired for God's sake. Like, why is he on your roster? Right. So like, there's some of this stuff that like, Jesse, I love you, but what the heck, man, like, this is just ridiculous. And then obviously, like you said too, Ronnie, get rid of some of these aging guys, go get some younger guys, go get some picks. The rebuilding is probably the most fun, the most rewarding, and the most work of any kind of team you're going to have. The teams where I'm contending, where it's kind of like set it and forget it, where the roster is pretty obvious and you don't have to make any decisions, it's kind of autopilot almost. Like it just sort of goes. And the rebuilds are where I spend a lot of my energy, a lot of my time. And that's what I like. It's what I prefer. So
it's so much more fun to trade in a rebuild too. Like you can take advantage of so many things when you don't care about scoring points.
I don't care about points. I'm just looking for next year, and I don't care about injured players. Like I love trading for injuries, like and people that are on injury dip. Like that's. I mean, again, I've turned teams around in 1 year because of that. Right, where like I'm kind of punting and not really sure my direction, and then I just go trade for all of the injured players, and the next year I win it all. Like that's happened to me in 2 or 3 leagues, I think now, where I just go from nothing to everything. It's so rewarding too to actually pull that off. So hopefully, Jesse, we gave you some good answers there. But Ronnie, you got anything else? I'm sorry.
One more thing. Just a reminder: Kelsey, Hill, Kamara, Devontae Adams. Move those 5 guys, and then I actually might go in, pay $25, get Fantasy Pros my playbook. Pull up the league analyzer and look at those top 5 teams and figure out which one needs a wide receiver, which one needs a tight end. Or if you don't want to pay the money, make a spreadsheet, look at them yourself, make the notes, and then just shoot those guys a text and be like, hey, do you want Devontae Adams? Send the other guy, hey, you want Travis Kelce? And make it happen.
Especially with the wide receivers and running backs in this league too, people are going to need more than in a normal league. So it's you can even kind of take more advantage if you're trying to start doing this.
And something else, I don't know. Go ahead.
I was going to say you can also put it in the league chat. List those 5 guys out and be like, yo, they're on the table. First come, first serve.
Yep. Make me an offer. I'll say yes. Exactly. Something I just noticed, and I'm not even sure if you caught this yet, Rocky, but Dexy's Midnight Runners has all but one of the first round picks.
Yeah, I did realize that. I didn't want to ruin your guys' flow, but it does make it harder to trade for the firsts because
that also though with what you said about the seconds being first in some way, then like maybe that's where you just target seconds and you look at this and you say, all right, instead of Kelce, instead of getting a first, you get 2 seconds or 3 seconds or whatever you can get. You might be able to kind of go around and get all of the seconds or even all of the thirds. There's going to be a ton of value there. I would still say try to acquire whatever you can. It's interesting too.
Get Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, like there's some other players I would try to like. Honestly, Anthony Richardson is one I would probably be interested in.
Yeah.
Dexy's Midnight Runners is kind of overperforming right now. They've got the 3rd or 2nd worst score in the league, but they're 3-3. So there could be some logic where Dexy's is like, you know what? Maybe I make a run for it. Maybe I go here and you can get some of those firsts out of them. For Kelce,
I would imagine he's not making all 11 picks. So
exactly. And I think a lot of people will trade for the picks. And then, like I said, when they start to show up and they're like, hey, I'm not doing well, but I'm 3-3. I mean, right in the middle of the pack here. I could make a run. And that's when players like Hill and Adams and Kelsey, like those players become much more valuable to a team like that. So I think we've given you a ton of options there, Jesse. Hopefully you can come up with a good trade and definitely report back to us in the DJ2 group chat even, or on Twitter with what you come up with. Ronnie, anything else you want to get into before we kick it out of here tonight?
Not really. I asked a really fun question in this Twitter space before I hopped on. I'll throw it at you guys, and then I got nothing else. Other than go Balls, Bama hate week. If you're watching and you're an Alabama fan, I don't like you. Don't follow me on Twitter.
Love it.
Let's say that you're in a Debbie league, but it's not really a Debbie. You just have a guaranteed acquisition of Marvin Harrison Jr. next year. But you have to make this trade. You have to trade away Puka Nacua. How much more are you adding to Puka to make that trade happen?
As of right now, not knowing where he's going, not knowing the future of anything, just as of today.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not much, to be honest with you. I think it's because Marvin Harrison, as of right now, is definitely going to be a dominant force wherever he lands. It's just I'm worried it's going to be like JSN, where he lands behind two other receivers, and so there's a lot of risk with him.
Wait till he lands with the Colts.
Well, or on the Broncos with Russ again. You know what I mean? Like there's a whole bunch of dud places that you're just like, oh. Or
no,
like
if he goes to the
Tennessee.
Colts, skyrocket, baby.
No, I know I'm saying that, but then there's also bad teams, right? Where it's like, oh, like he lands on Tennessee, and you're like, oh God, now he's with Malik Willis or Will Levis. Like I don't want, just there's some bad spots, And I think knowing what I know now, and even with that guarantee, I might say they're pretty close to even, unfortunately, because Puka's just scoring points. Granted, not this week, but most weeks he's scoring really well, and that's hard to find. And I tend to prefer points over potential. What do you think, Rocky?
I lean more towards you, where I wouldn't add a ton to Puka. I'm more about when I see, and this is weird to say because we're only 5 weeks into his career, but when I see proven production, that just outweighs the potential of rookies to me. I think a lot more than it does for some people. And this is proven young production. Again, only 5 weeks. I get it, but you don't get 35 targets in 2 games to start your career if you're not a really good football player. Yeah. So I think he's just gonna. I've said. And I said even before Cup came back, and we saw it in his first game back that he was perfectly fine. The last game didn't go so well, but he can be like the Robert Woods to Cup. Robert Woods was a low end wide receiver 1, high end 2 with Cup at Cup's peak. So and then Cup, how much longer does Cup have? And then Puka can step into the wide receiver 1 role there, like he was doing for the first 3 weeks, and just get pumped by targets, pumped up with targets. So it may be presumptuous to think in 5 weeks we know everything about him, but he showed so much in those 5 weeks that I basically consider it proven production, and the guy's a rookie, and I want him almost as much as I would want Marvin Harrison, even though I know the guy's great.
Doesn't it feel like you would be trading the known good of Puka for the what could be as good as Puka Marvin Harrison?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it feels like no. I don't want the boat. Give me the box. It could be anything. It could even be a boat. Like it's what it feels like to me. It's one of those trades, and that's so crazy because again, 2 months ago, not even 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago,
it would have been insane.
Right?
This
Puka was a
conversation
third rounder. Yeah, Puka was a third rounder, and a lot of places were like, no, he's not going to be anything because Cooper Kupp is coming back, and that team is terrible. And nope, he is dominating. So that's a great question, Ronnie. Thank you for that. Anything you want to push or promote before we kind of close it up for shop for the night?
I think in the next month and a half or so, I'm going to start doing some things with that Fantasy Proceeds Twitter account. And the nonprofit filing and everything is in motion, and all that's really exciting. And so if people could go and follow that account, I think it only has 47 followers right now. It's been very low-key, not a lot of publicity. But I'm hoping to do some things that help change a lot of people's lives for the better. And it's probably going to start in a lot of ways with that account. So that would be my number one ask.
Love it. Yeah, no, definitely go follow Fantasy Proceeds on X. Follow Ronnie at Ronnie A. Evans. Follow me at Andrew Hall. Follow Rocky at Dynasty FF Addict. You can follow us on the Dynasty Junkies handle as well at Dynasty Junkies. Follow us on the DAP network on YouTube. If you follow us anywhere, mention, subscribe, rate, review, do all of those things. Thank you so much to everybody in the chat. Greg was a big fan of the chat. Greg Kellogg. a longtime Dynasty
Love you,
fantasy
Greg.
player. Troy Olson showed up in the chat for a little bit. We had Tater Wolf, Albert in there. So a lot of good people in the chat. Appreciate you guys all stopping by. Thanks so much. Hopefully the rest of your Thursday, the rest of your week 7 goes well for everybody. But with that, I want to kick it to you, Rocky, to take us out of here.
You kind of shouted out everybody already, so I guess that just leaves me to say Junkies out.